So a couple of my really close friends, Cam and Ronnie, bought me this poster about 2 years ago. And today I'm gonna create, finally, a great frame to put it on the wall. So you made it this far into the video, only a few seconds, and you're a seasoned craftsperson, or you're a novice and that wants to learn woodworking. Building a basic picture frame with miters and profiles, there is so much technique and basic woodworking skills. And also for those seasoned craftspeople, I'm going to show you some wicked tips and tricks that I have learned over the years. I'm going to start with this cherry. I ripped it 50 millimeter or roughly 2 inches. I'm going to try to put some imperial measurements in there for you. And now I'm going to take it to the router table and put a profile on the inside and outside. Okay, so this is the beading bit we're going to use. I'll show you how to set it up in the table, router table. It produces this bead right here. And this is part of the 5-piece mitered door we did, and we had a groove in it, but we're going to do a rabbet also on the inside of the frame, of course. And what I want to do is put one here and one here, so it'll be a double run on here. It'll look really slick. So let's set it up. So the point I truly want to get across to you in this video, or this segment of the video, is once you have a profile that you're really happy with, make sure you save a sample of it. It makes setting it up in the router table so much easier. So now before I put the fence on, I can actually set this profile here just by holding it here and bringing it right down exactly where it needs to be. Perfect. Okay, so once I have the bit and the height installed, I'm going to work my fence where I'm going to loosen up the fence here, this side, and bring it into close proximity so I don't cut the fence, but I have full support and lock it in. The most important part of setting up a beading bit like this, in my eyes, is making sure that your fence is in close proximity. But the important part is this is a bearinged bit. You need a good straight edge. You bring it right in and make sure that the fence is supported to the bearing where there's no space here and here, but the bearing is still spinning. So you have your router table fence set up. It's brought into close proximity of your bit so you have an even flow. You must have a good hold down and a hold in featherboard system. It makes this process so much easier. So I have a piece of scrap here and we'll look at it after I run it. Make sure you have a push stick as well to push it all the way through. Okay, so this profile, from my eyes, came out exactly how I wanted it. And you may have noticed that I was putting pressure on this because this system that I'm using has these two little tines here. That's my featherboard. The nice thing about this system is my hand is never near the bit and I can put firm pressure right there. So when you run this, and when I run each of this piece of cherry 50 millimeter, I am going to analyze the bead. Okay, because you want a full round over in a profile, and if you don't have constant pressure here and down, you will end up with little facets or little flat spots. So I will check every single time to make sure that that is perfectly profiled. Here's a tip that'll help you out in the long run, is if you notice, I milled all of this yesterday, and there's a slight bow in some of these. These are gonna, I will, when we start dimensioning this, we'll cut the bow out. But to put it up against that profile, you wanna put the bow facing in. So what I do is I just take a couple of minutes to see if there's any bow in the material. And what I'll do is I also look to see where it's clear for the bead, and I'll put that as my inside, and this is my face. So I know when I go to the router table, this will be a lot smoother. I hope that last segment made sense, because now I'm going to put the crown toward the fence. I don't even have to think about it. I know that's going to be my inside bead, and I know that's going toward the fence. And hopefully that made sense. Now, what I'm gonna do is I always have this before I turn on. This is my push stick. I'll put it right here before I turn on so I know it's there. As I check both sides, don't get too sure of yourself. Always check, because you know when this really pops, those little flat spots, is when you get it all together, and then the next thing you know, you start to finish it and those pop on you. So it'll save you a ton of time in the long run of final sanding. Okay, at the very end of this, because this board had a slight crown, I actually heard this, but I also, after verifying and feeling it, it has a slight flat spot. We may cut this out, but why? This may be needed for the frame. So what I'm going to do, it's simple. We can rerun this, and I'll be really conscientious at this point, and I'll actually mark it here where I need to really pay attention. Perfect. Okay, so when you are looking at purchasing a rabbeting bit, get the ones, this is one of my originals, that has multiple bearings, because you can control this dimension from here to here. And where that dimension is the depth of rabbet this way. So if I take it like this one is 10 millimeters in depth. And I'll show you how to calculate that when we cut our miters. The second measurement, and this is confusing, this was confusing to me years and years ago, is how do I control the depth this way? And that is by adjusting the height of the rabbeting bit. Now, once again, when you are satisfied after running your rabbets or rebates, however you say it, save a sample. Because you know this bead profile here was easy to set up. With a sample, the rabbet's even easier. So I chose a rabbeting bit with a bearing that allows me to get the depth here of 10 millimeters. Now I just have to adjust the height to get 10 millimeters in depth the other way. And the setup's the same. Bring your fences in close and bring that bearing perfectly in line with the fences. Once again, I got my hold down in the proper position and my hold in, which is, they're both feather boards, but I'm gonna run some sample stock. So just a quick verification. This way, 10, and this way, 10. Perfect. That's called putting a rabbet on your molding, okay? And basically what we did is we created a double bead here, okay? Inside and outside in a rabbet. And hopefully it came across that it made sense setting the height of the bit for this dimension here and setting or putting on the proper bearing for this dimension. Because this is where we need to start measuring to cut our miters. And in the past, we've measured from the long point to long point, but now we're gonna measure short point to short point. And I'll show you some great tips and tricks. We also have to accommodate for this picture. Whether it's a poster, a mirror, a picture, print, whatever. The way I start is I measure from side to side and top to bottom, and I write down my measurements. So I'm going to measure side to side, and I always do this so I don't forget. I'll write down, that's 330 millimeter, roughly 13 inches. And then I'll measure top to bottom. and that is 480 millimeters. And I'll just write that down, because now what I have to do is compensate, and we know the math is easy because we know that's 10 millimeters for the rabbet this way. So as you can see, the picture, the mirror, the print, whatever, painting is gonna go and sit on this ledge. All right, but first we'll cut a piece of glass, plexiglass, then this goes in here, and then we'll cut another piece of hardwood and put it all together. But you have to compensate for that 10 millimeters. And if I do my math correctly, 10 on this side and 10 on this side is what? Of course, it's 20. So now to get a little more confusing, I want to leave a millimeter on each side. Okay, so it makes it easier to put all the pieces and parts together when we do our final set. Okay, now, if we did our math correctly, this is 10 and 10 on each side, that's 20, correct? So what I'll do is I'll subtract 20 from 330 for the top part, top and bottom, and that'll be 310. And then what I'll do is I will add 2 more millimeters. So instead of cutting from short point to short point, 310, I'll cut 312, adding a millimeter to each, and the same from top to bottom. What that will do, if we do the short point to short point, that'll give us a little extra wiggle room. Couple of tips and tricks on cutting great miters. Today, our short point will be what? The rabbeting edge right here. So what I want to do, and here's my first tip for you. When I cut miters, I always use a hold down. That way there, it doesn't shift as I push through the miter. So measuring from short point can be really difficult because I really don't have anything to grab on. I was taught this by a trim carpenter guy once, and I thought, oh, holy moly. He put his short point there and locked it down. Okay, and then he took his folding ruler and he measured out short point to short point, just like this with the edge of the fence, and put that perfectly even and measure out 312 right here. So I have my mark here, and I know that's where it's 312, so I'm just gonna take a 90 and just extend the line like this, okay, because I want my 312 to start right there, and then I'm just going to grab my handy dandy miter bevel and bring it right in here like this. So with these layout lines, I know exactly where my blade's going to cut at that forward edge of the short point, 312 millimeters. Short point to short point. So I just verified that this was from here to here, 312 millimeters. But I need another one for the top, okay? So how do I get an exact duplicate? I do not overthink this. I've already cut my corresponding miter here. I take them, I stack them together. I bring this piece in here. I make sure that this is perfectly flush. And then I bring my piece in here, line it up, still verifying perfectly flush, and lock it down and make my cut. And there you go, perfect miters. Now I just got to do the long pieces for the sides. Short point to short point, 462. Hey, let's cut the corresponding piece. So let's see if the measurements came out before we go into the joinery and glue up of the frame. I'm just going to take this, bring it at a right angle here. This is just a rough look at what we need. Oh boy, that came together wicked nice. Okay, but let's check to see if the picture fits. Ooh la la. So before I start joining, I am gonna start to mark my miters here of what face I'm working off of. Okay, the rest is fairly straightforward. We've done a lot of videos with the Domino. One of our top videos is 4 joints you can do with the Domino, and one of them happens to be the miter. And always remember, we always reference the paddle from the long point, and we do it in the tight setting. So this is the face that I've marked, and then what we're gonna do is put the plate on there off of the table. That's in the 4 laws of the Domino. But more important, we measured this thickness at 20 millimeters. So here, the height of the plate reached 20. That's the thickness of the material in this little window. So 20 millimeters, we're gonna fault on third, and a third rule. We use a 6 by 40 Domino. So half of 40, I believe, is 20. And we'll set our plunge depth right here at 20 and make sure we have a 6 millimeter bit on the Domino. So one of the things that I can coach you on is make sure when you start your glue up that you have all your clamps ready. You have your water, your cleaning tools, a rag, and all the things you need for glue up so you're not rushing around. So now this is all gonna come together, and there's a reason I love using the Domino joiner for this application. For years and years doing miters, and I'll do another video on all the ways to put together miters, or the way I have grown up using miters. But every time I would put them in clamps, whether using a band clamp or the pins to put them together, they would slide like this. Well, because we did from the long point, okay, and we use the tight setting on the Domino, when I put these together, it makes it a locked joint with no slippage, with plenty of long grain to long grain adhesion, and we can use just Bessie K-bodies. Very important, don't get ahead of yourself. Always, 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 to make sure your joinery is right on, do a dry fit with your Dominoes. Okay, because a miter cut is kind of a wacky long grain, end grain combination, what I'd like to do, I've done this for so long, is I like to put a little on there, and as I go around and do it to each one, that's called sizing the miter. When I put the Dominoes in, what I like to do is I like to butter the Domino here, okay, and get plenty on there. Don't overdo. And when I put it in, it wicks to the adjacent surfaces because there's little herringbone design, and I just make sure that that's coated completely, and I do all my pieces like that, and then I'll just assemble it. I always have coached people in doing miters before when they start putting it all together. Once you get it into clamps with glue and you start putting together, all of them come together absolutely perfect if you've cut them properly. So just take your time, be patient with yourself, and get 4 clamps on like this, and you'll see the miters come together absolutely perfect. On the front profile here where those beads are, I will wipe away with a damp, not soaking wet, damp rag. So where the bead profile is, you're gonna have a little squeeze out. What I like to do is I'd like to dampen the toothbrush and get right in there to get that glue squeeze out in there. I learned this from my buddy Bob, and I'll tell you what, this will save you a ton of time if you do bead profiles. It works like a champ. Now we just gotta wait for the glue to dry. All right, so I let it set overnight, and let's take it out of the clamps. All right, so we have it out of the clamps, and at first glance it looks great, but there's a few little things I want to final fit and finish, and I will show you that in the next video. I'll show you how to cut the glass, I'll show you how to fit it, I'll show you how to set it, and I'll show you how to refine your frame for a perfect mitered picture frame. So as we always say from the SedgeTool shop, be positive, stay sharp, and we mean wicked sharp.